When we speak of the Great Wall of China, the mind often leaps to the image of a long ribbon of stone winding like a serpent over mountains and through valleys, reaching toward distant horizons. Yet when you are listening late at night, when the room is quiet and the mind is slowing down, the Great Wall can be imagined not as a monument of might, nor as a frontier of war, but as a series of silent stones resting under the endless sky. The wall is not a single structure, though our words often make it sound so. It is instead a vast collection of walls, ramparts, towers, and fortifications built across centuries, even across millennia, by hands that are long turned to dust. In the pale silver of moonlight, the stones themselves might seem to breathe. If you were to stand upon the wall in such a moment, perhaps on a quiet ridge where the world has forgotten to visit, you would hear almost nothing but the wind. The murmur of history would flow like a river below. Each block of stone, each tamped layer of earth, once carried by laborers, soldiers, and villagers, lies still now waiting for time to pass. The wall is not hasty, it does not hurry. It knows that centuries are only days in its existence. The story of the Great Wall begins before it was even called great, during the era of the warring states, long before China was united. Small kingdoms raised their own barriers. These were not made of cut stone or brick, but of tamped earth, layered and pressed again and again until it was firm enough to stand against riders from the northern steppe. These early walls were short, broken, and often lost, but their memory survives. They were the first whispers of what would, much later, become the vast structure we know today. If you close your eyes, you can imagine those ancient laborers, men with baskets slung across their backs, women carrying water, oxen pulling loads of timber, children perhaps nearby, playing in the dust. Their work was simple, repetitive, and heavy. One layer of earth pressed down, another poured on top, then more tamping, more stamping of feet. In time, an earthen ridge appeared, stretching across hillsides and valleys, marking the boundary between one state and another. It was not yet the Great Wall, but it was the beginning of the idea that a line of fortification could keep watch, that stones and earth could become guardians. Centuries later, when Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China, looked northward at the open lands from which nomadic horsemen came, he too imagined walls. His empire had swallowed the smaller states, but their walls still stood. He commanded that they be joined, extended, and strengthened. In this way, the dream of a great wall began to take a shape recognizable to us. It was not smooth. It was not yet beautiful. It was not even continuous, but it was vast. Thousands upon thousands of workers were sent to labor on it, soldiers, peasants, convicts, all pressed into service for the emperor's vision. Legends grew around that effort. Some tell of families torn apart, of men who never returned, of wives who mourned by the wall until their tears brought it down. The most famous is the story of Meng Jiangnu, whose grief was said to topple stones. Whether legend or not, such tales reflect the truth of human labor and human cost hidden within the silent stones. But tonight, as we drift through this history, we are not thinking of the clash of armies, nor of the whip of overseers. We are simply wandering along the quiet ridges, where the stones are softened by moss and lichen, where wildflowers push between the cracks, where silence is older than any voice. From a distance, the wall seems endless, but when you are upon it, each step is slow, deliberate, measured. Stone follows stone, tower follows tower, each a marker of time's patient hand. The Great Wall is not one wall, but many. Some sections are made of earth and reeds, long since eroded back into the soil. Others are of brick, standing proudly through centuries. Some snake over mountain ranges, sharp and dramatic. Others wander through open plains, nearly blending into the horizon. Each segment is a story, and together they form something greater, monument not just of defense, but of entrance. When the sun sets and the stars come out above, The wall seems to dissolve into the night sky. It becomes a bridge not only across land but across time. Those who built it never saw its full extent. Those who stood watch upon it never imagined the tourists who would one day wander its restored paths. Yet the wall itself endures in silence, patient as stone must be, and so, as you breathe slowly and evenly, as you rest your mind upon these ancient stones, think of the wall not as a fortress, but as a lullaby written in earth and rock. The endless ridges are the verses, the watchtowers are the pauses, the mountains are the rhythm, and the silence is the song. Long before the Great Wall was imagined as a single unbroken barrier, before its stones climbed the mountains in their winding way, China was divided into many states. It was a time known as the Warring States period, stretching from the 5th to the 3rd century before our era. 7 great powers, Qin, Chu, Zhao, Wei, Han, Yan, and Qi, vied for dominance, while smaller states endured between them like fragile reeds in the current of a stormy river. Each ruler looked upward, wary of rival armies, and northward, toward the grasslands where mounted raiders rode swiftly across open horizons. It was in this time of tension and competition that the idea of walls began to take root. These were not walls of stone. They were not built with the grandeur of towers or the weight of bricks. Instead, they were made of earth-common soil, tapped and pressed again and again into firm ridges. The technique was simple. Layers of dirt, gravel, straw, or reeds were poured, then stamped down by workers' feet or by heavy wooden mallets. One layer was laid upon another until a wall of packed earth stood high enough to slow horsemen, and high enough to mark a clear division between inside and outside. The earliest of these walls were often no more than local fortifications, stretching across a valley or guarding the entrance to a plain. They were less a single barrier and more a patchwork of defenses, but even in their simplicity, they carried weight. They were a statement: this land is ours. Beyond this barrier lies another people, another state, another power. The earth was drawn into lines, and the lines became borders. If you imagine one of these walls at dawn, the picture is not dramatic, yet it is strangely calming. A pale ridge of earth, perhaps 6 or 7 meters high, winding along a hill, a line of wooden stakes, sharpened and planted on top. The mist of morning clings to the soil. Farmers move nearby, tending to their fields, casting curious glances at the rampart that now separates them from the world beyond. The wall is new, yet already it feels eternal, as though the land itself has decided where one place ends and another begins. The labor to build these early walls was immense. Armies of workers, peasants, conscripts, sometimes even prisoners were gathered to the task. Tools were basic: wooden shovels, wicker baskets, heavy mallets. Progress was slow, the days long. A group of men would carry baskets of earth, pour them into place, then tamp them down rhythmically step after step, until the soil hardened like stone. The sound of this work might echo across valleys: the steady thump of mallets, the shuffle of feet, the sigh of tired voices. Then silence again, broken only by the wind. At night, these same workers might rest in small camps beside the walls. Fires flickered. Simple meals were cooked: grains, perhaps a bit of vegetable, sometimes meat if fortune allowed. Laughter and conversation mingled with the crackle of flame. But all the while, the looming shadow of the unfinished wall stretched behind them, like a reminder of tomorrow's labor. They were not told that their work was grand. They were not told that it would be remembered for centuries. To them, it was toil, an order from rulers, a burden that must be carried. And yet, unknowingly, they were laying the first foundation stones of one of history's greatest monuments. The warring states built their walls not only against nomadic riders, but against each other. The walls stood as both shield and symbol, declaring strength and warning neighbors. Some ran across entire provinces, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Others were short and isolated. In time, they would erode, crumbling back into the soil. Many were forgotten, buried under fields, lost beneath villages, yet traces remain even now. Faint ridges that archaeologists can still trace, showing where human hands once pressed earth into memory. The walls of the warring states were never continuous, and they were never truly secure. Horsemen could ride around them, rivers could undermine them, rains could wash them away, but still they endured as an idea. The idea that a boundary raised by human labor could stand against time, that earth itself could be reshaped to protect centuries. Later, when the Qin dynasty unified the land, these scattered earthen walls were gathered into a grander vision. But here, in this early moment, they were small, fragile, and local, silent beginnings. Like the faint sketch of an artist before the painting, they hinted at the future, but knew nothing of it. And so, as we rest with this chapter of history, we can picture those quiet earth ridges, under morning mist, stretching into empty hills. They are not yet the Great Wall, but they are its ancestors. They are the first silent stones, or rather, silent soils of ancient China. The story of the Great Wall cannot be told without speaking of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. His name lingers through history like the echo of a drumbeat, ambitious, immense, and unyielding. Before him, there had been many kings, and many walls, scattered and disconnected. After him, there was one empire, and the dream, though not yet the reality, of a unified wall stretching across the north. Qin Shi Huang rose to power in the 3rd century before our era, when the land of China was fractured into warring states. With relentless campaigns, careful strategies, and iron determination, he conquered his rivals. In the year 221 BCE, he declared himself the first emperor of Qin, uniting the states into a single empire. It was a moment of transformation. No longer would China be many voices at war. It would be one realm with one ruler, one code of law, one written script, and one vision for its defense. The emperor's gaze turned northward. Beyond the settled lands of his new empire lay the wide, rolling steppes, where mounted nomads rode swiftly across the grasslands. They were skilled horsemen, archers who could loose arrows while galloping, raiders who struck quickly and disappeared into the horizon. The Xiongnu in particular were feared as fierce and mobile foes to guard against them. Qin Shi Huang sought to do what no ruler before him had achieved, to join the scattered walls of the conquered states, extending and binding them into a greater barrier. It was not a single act of construction. It was not that one morning laborers set out to build the Great Wall. Instead, it was an order that stretched across years and across provinces. Walls already existed in Zhao and Yan. In Qin itself, these were connected, repaired, and lengthened. In some places, entirely new stretches were raised, using the same method of tamped earth that had served the warring states. Soldiers, peasants, convicts, and conscripts were summoned to the task. They worked in great numbers, though we can never know exactly how many, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands. The labor was immense. Imagine lines of men trudging up hillsides, baskets of earth slung across their shoulders. The sun beats down, dust rises in clouds, overseers shout orders. One group shovels, another carries, another tamps. The rhythm is endless. Pour, stamp, lift, repeat, day after day, season after season. The wall grows, layer by layer, ridge by ridge. Some die in the heat, some fall from exhaustion. Some are buried within the wall itself. According to later tales, though whether myth or reality, the image is haunting. Yet even in this harshness, there is a kind of quiet endurance. When the sun sets and the work ceases, the wall stands taller than before. When winter comes, winds sweep snow across the ridges, and the wall endures still. The emperor's will is heavy, but the earth accepts it, hardening under the stamping of thousands of feet. The Qin Wall, as historians sometimes call it, was not the stone and brick structure most imagined today. It was earth, tamped and packed. its surface sometimes covered with reeds or stones for strength. In the mountains, it followed ridges. In the plains, it cut straight lines across the horizon. It was rugged, rough, and in many places it did not last. Yet for its time, it was extraordinary, a barrier stretching for thousands of kilometers, binding together the work of many states into the vision of one emperor. The first emperor himself never walked its full length. No one did. It was too vast, too scattered, too harsh. But the idea of it lived in his reign. It became a symbol not only of defense, but of control. The emperor's power pressed into the very soil, marking the boundary between China and the lands beyond. Around the wall, life continued quietly. Farmers tilled their fields, villagers raised families. Soldiers stood watch in lonely posts, gazing out at the steppe, listening for the distant thunder of hooves. The wall was there behind them. Strong and steady, it was not impenetrable. Raiders could still find ways around it or through its weak points. But it was something, a sign of resistance, a declaration of permanence. Legends later painted the Qin Wall with sorrow. They told of men taken from their homes, of families torn apart, of women left to weep at the wall's edge. The most famous is the tale of Meng Jiangnu, whose husband was forced into labor and died at the wall. Her grief was so deep, her tears so endless, that part of the wall collapsed in sympathy. Whether this is true or not, the story lingers, because it captures the human cost hidden within the grandeur of the emperor's ambition. And yet, if you stand today on the faint remains of a Qin-era wall, some of which still survive, you will not hear sorrow. You will hear silence. The earth walls have softened with time, their edges worn smooth by wind and rain. They no longer guard, nor divide. They simply rest, blending with the hills and valleys. The emperor who ordered them is gone, his dynasty long collapsed, but the walls remain patient, unhurried. Quiet. In them lies the beginning of the great wall as we know it, not yet the mighty stonework of later centuries, not yet the picturesque ridges seen in photographs, but the seed of the idea, a wall vast enough to be more than a local defense, a wall that would outlast its maker, a wall that, even in ruin, whispers of ambition. As night falls in our imagination, we can picture the Qin Wall under the stars, a line of earth glowing faintly in moonlight, stretching toward a horizon we cannot see. It is incomplete, imperfect, fragile, and yet it is the dream of something greater. It is the dream of a wall that would in time become a legend. When the Qin dynasty fell, the wall it had begun did not vanish. Earth softens, stones crack, dynasties collapse, but the idea of the wall endured. In the centuries that followed, it was not forgotten. The Han dynasty, which rose in 206 BC and lasted for more than 4 centuries, looked upon the northern frontier and decided once again to raise barriers. But the Han, unlike the Qin, were not merely defending fiefs and villages. They were protecting something new, something that would become one of history's great currents. The Silk Road. The Han Empire stretched wide, from fertile river valleys to high deserts, from mountain ridges to open plains. It was an age of trade and exchange, when silk from Chinese looms, light as breath and strong as thread, found its way westward, carried by caravans through deserts and oases, toward distant lands. In return came glass, horses, spices, and stories. The wall was not only a military shield but a guardian of these routes, a spine of fortresses and passes that gave safety to travelers venturing across hostile landscapes. The Han walls were longer, stronger, and more organized than those of the Qin. Much of their construction still relied on tamped earth, pressed into layers until it hardened like stone. In desert regions, sand and reeds were bound together in repeating layers, forming ridges that still, astonishingly, survive today after 2,000 years. In the mountains, the walls followed ridgelines overlooking valleys where caravans moved. Like threads of light in the dust, watchtowers were built at regular intervals, stout, square, and silent like beads strung along a cord. Within these towers, soldiers kept their lonely vigil. Their duties were not glamorous. They watched the horizon. They tended fires, which could be lit as beacons to send warnings down the line. They patrolled the wall's length. At night, they listened to the wind sweep over the dunes, or the cries of wolves echoing in the distance. Some soldiers stayed for years, their lives passing quietly in the shadow of the wall. Their names lost to time, yet their presence gave the wall its strength, for stone and earth cannot watch without eyes, nor signal without hands. The most famous section of the Han Wall ran through the Gansu corridor, a narrow passage between mountains and desert. It was here that the Silk Road passed, a gateway between China and the world beyond. Fortresses such as Yumenguan, the Jade Gate, stood as symbols of transition, where caravans left the heartland and entered the long reaches of desert, or returned carrying treasures unseen in the east. The wall at such places was not only defense, but also checkpoint, frontier, and threshold. To pass through its gates was to cross from one world into another. Imagine, for a moment, a caravan pausing at the wall. Camels kneel, their saddles heavy with bales of silk. Traders speak in many tongues, Chinese, Persian, perhaps languages from still farther away. The air smells of dust and spice. Soldiers inspect the goods, make notes, open the gates. Beyond lies desert, vast and dry. Behind lies China, with its rivers and fields. The wall marks the divide. It is both boundary and bridge, a silent witness to the meeting of cultures. Over time, the Han dynasty extended the wall far westward, reaching deep into lands where few Chinese had gone before. Forts dotted the frontier, linked not only by the wall but by a network of beacon towers. Messages could be carried swiftly across vast distances by fire at night or smoke by day, leaping from tower to tower. In this way, the wall was not only a line of defense, but also a line of communication, binding the empire together across empty lands. And yet, despite its length and strength, the wall was never absolute. Raiders could still slip around it. Storms could erode it. Desert winds could bury it. But its presence mattered. It was a statement of the empire's reach, a declaration that here, at this line, order stood against the wilderness. It was also a reassurance for those who traveled the Silk Road, knowing that forts and walls offered a measure of safety against the uncertainties of the journey. Today, fragments of the Han Wall can still be found in the Gobi Desert. Ridges of tamped earth rise unexpectedly from the sands, weathered but enduring. Some beacon towers stand alone, their outlines softened by centuries, yet still reaching skyward. To stand before them is to feel both the vastness of time and the quiet persistence of human effort. The Han soldiers who built them are long gone. The caravans they watched have vanished into history, but the walls remained silent guardians of a road that once carried the lifeblood of civilizations. As we imagine them now, in the calm of night, we can see the Han Wall stretching across dunes under a starry sky, its towers flickering with small watchfires, its ridges glowing faintly in moonlight. The caravans rest nearby, camels kneeling, merchants sleeping under blankets. The desert, air cool and dry. The wall does not speak, it simply watches, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more. The Great Wall, though immense, was never a finished work. It was never one single wall laid down once and for all, complete and eternal. Rather, it was a living thing, sometimes strong, sometimes broken, sometimes forgotten, and sometimes renewed. Each dynasty that held China looked northward, and saw both the promise of peace within and the threat of riders beyond. And so, again and again, emperors returned to the wall, patching it, rebuilding it, reshaping it, breathing new life into its stones and soil. Between the Han dynasty and the later Ming, long centuries passed, dynasties rose and fell, and with them the fortunes of the wall shifted. The Tang dynasty beginning in the 7th century, and the Song dynasty beginning in the 10th, both looked upon the wall in their time. These were not eras of grand, new construction. not times of sweeping ambition like Qin Shi Huang's. Instead, they were times of repair, reinforcement, and rebuilding, moments when the wall's old body, worn by wind and war, needed care. The Tang dynasty is remembered as a golden age of Chinese culture, an age of poetry, painting, music, and the flourishing of the Silk Road. In such a time, the wall's role was subtle but necessary. Though the Tang pushed their influence far into Central Asia, they still relied on fortifications to steady the frontier. Along stretches of desert and mountain, old Han walls were shored up, watchtowers were repaired, earth ridges were strengthened with layers of stone. Garrison posts were manned so that caravans flowing through the Silk Road could move with greater safety. One can imagine a Tang officer standing on a weathered section of wall, gazing westward at the desert horizon. Behind him, the empire's heartland pulsed with scholars and poets. Before him, the wild frontier stretched endlessly, a place of danger and promise alike. His men patrolled slowly, their armor clinking softly, their banners rippling in the dry wind. The wall beneath them was old, but the emperor's orders had seen it tended, its towers once again strong, its beacons once again able to send smoke by day and flame by night. The Song dynasty came later, in an age of both prosperity and strain. From the 10th to the 13th century, the Song faced pressure from powerful neighbors. In the north, the Khitan Liao, the Jurchen Jin, and eventually the Mongols. The wall in these times was both shield and symbol. Though no single massive rebuilding was undertaken, sections were repaired again and again, bricks set carefully into old foundations, watchtowers restored where they had crumbled. It was during these centuries that brick began to take on a larger role in the wall's construction. Earth alone, though sturdy when pressed, could be worn down by wind, rain, and time. Stone was durable but heavy, difficult to quarry and transport in vast quantities. Brick, however, offered a middle path. It could be shaped, fired, and stacked, giving the wall greater resilience and a cleaner form. In places where brick was available, walls rose in straight, dark lines, their surfaces smoother, their edges more defined. Picture a quiet scene of Song workers repairing such a wall. The air is cool, a small kiln smolders nearby, firing bricks day and night. Men lift them carefully, stacking them in neat rows, binding them with mortar. The sound is slow, repetitive, stone on stone, hand over hand. Each brick is small, but together they form a line that stretches across hills, valleys, and passes. The wall is once again whole, at least for a time. And yet, as always, the wall was imperfect. No matter how carefully it was built or repaired, there were always gaps, always weaknesses. Armies from the steppe were skilled in finding them. The wall slowed them, but it did not always stop them. Still, its presence mattered. It gave soldiers high ground. It gave watchmen warning. It gave farmers, within a measure of safety, enough that they could till their fields with greater confidence, knowing the empire had not abandoned them. Centuries blurred together, and the wall changed slowly, as if breathing. In the Tang it stood as guardian of a flourishing Silk Road. In the Song it was patched and bricked, holding against restless neighbors. Always it stretched, always it endured. Always it remained not as a single line, but as a collection of lines, each one shaped by the hands of those who feared and those who hoped. If you stand today on a section once touched by Tang or Song repair, you may see little difference. The stones are old, the earth worn, the bricks crumbling, but beneath your feet lies a palimpsest of centuries, layer upon layer of labor, dynasty upon dynasty of care. Each generation added something, even if only a tower, a ridge, a stack of bricks. Together, they made the wall not eternal, but enduring. As the night falls in our imagination, the Tang and Song walls glow faintly under the stars. Their bricks, weathered but steadfast, hold the shape of forgotten labors. Soldiers no longer patrol, kilns no longer smoke, overseers no longer shout, but the wall remains, breathing quietly, resting between earth and sky. For centuries the wall had risen and fallen, sometimes mighty, sometimes neglected, but it was during the Ming Dynasty beginning in the 14th century that the Great Wall became most like the vision we hold today. The Ming emperors faced a formidable challenge. The steppe to the north was restless, home to powerful nomadic confederations, skilled horsemen whose raids could sweep deep into China's heartlands. To guard against them, the Ming resolved not merely to patch the old walls of earth and brick, but to raise a barrier of stone fortresses strung across mountains, ridges, and valleys. As enduring as the land itself, the Ming Wall, as it came to be known, was a work of unprecedented scale. Stretching thousands of kilometers, it was more continuous, more solid, and more enduring than anything before it. Unlike the walls of Qin or Han, which were built largely of tamp earth, the Ming chose stone and brick as their foundation. The wall's base was made of large stone blocks, set firmly into the ground. Above rose brickwork, laid in neat courses, forming a barrier as wide as a road and as tall as a tower. Where earlier walls might crumble after seasons of wind and rain, the Ming Wall stood, defiant and heavy, its silhouette etched across the mountains. The most famous stretches, those near Beijing, give a sense of the Ming ambition. There, the wall climbed sheer ridges, its towers perched like crowns upon peaks, its battlements tracing the curves of the land. Each tower is like a fortress unto itself, square or octagonal, with arched windows for archers, platforms for signaling, fires, and stone stairways within. Soldiers could stand watch from these towers, gazing far into the valleys, their eyes scanning the horizon for dust rising from hose. The construction was immense, and as always, it demanded labor. Soldiers, peasants, craftsmen, and prisoners all took part. Stone was quarried from nearby mountains, hauled up steep slopes, chiseled, and set in place. Bricks were fired in kilns, carried in baskets, stacked row upon row. Mortar was mixed up, lime and glutinous rice, a substance both sticky and strong, binding stone to stone with surprising resilience. In some places, the wall became so wide that carts could travel upon it. In others, it narrowed to a mere path, a ridge where the land itself fell away on either side. At dusk, one might imagine a Ming garrison gathering at their tower. Fires flicker in the hearth. Rice is cooked in simple pots. A watchman leans on the battlement, staring northward into the vastness of the steppe. Perhaps he hears nothing but wind. Perhaps he wonders if raiders might appear in the night. Behind him, the empire sleeps. Fields tended, markets bustling, children playing, protected, in part, by the stone under his feet. The wall was both shield and burden, both reassurance and endless duty. Unlike the fragile ridges of tamp earth, the Ming Wall was designed to endure. Its stones still stand today, centuries later. Though weathered and broken in places, some stretches are grand and carefully restored, with steps polished by countless visitors. Others are wild and ruined, overgrown with grass, their towers crumbling into heaps of stone. Yet even in ruin, they possess a solemn strength, as if the mountains themselves have taken them back, slowly but tenderly. The Ming Wall was not only a defense but also a network. Signal towers were placed within sight of one another, so that smoke by day and fire by night could send messages swiftly across hundreds of kilometers. Garrisons were stationed at intervals, their soldiers rotating through long watches. Supply depots, granaries, and barracks lay along its course, forming a living frontier that pulsed with human presence. And yet, for all its strength, the wall could not stop the tides of history. The Mongols still rode, the Mongols would later sweep into China, and the Ming dynasty itself would eventually fall. The wall was vast, but no barrier is absolute. Still, its presence mattered. It slowed invasions, it guarded trade routes, it gave the empire confidence. And more than that, it left behind a monument, a structure so immense and enduring that it outlasted the dynasty that built it. Today, when one imagines the Great Wall, It is most often the Ming Wall that comes to mind, its stone battlements. Rising sharply against a blue sky, its towers framed by autumn leaves or winter snow, its ridges glowing golden in evening light. It is this wall that has become a symbol not only of China, but of human persistence, the patience to lay stone upon stone, the will to stretch across mountains, the dream to leave behind something greater than a lifetime. As we rest with this chapter, we might picture the Ming Wall at twilight. The mountains are blue with shadow. The wall glows faintly, a pale line tracing the ridges. Watchtowers rise like lanterns against the sky. No soldiers march, no riders attack, no overseers command. Only the stones remain quiet and watchful, waiting for the centuries to pass. If the wall is the body, then its watchtowers are the eyes. They rise at regular intervals, square or round, simple or elaborate, scattered across mountains and plains, in the silence of dawn. When fog clings to the ridges and valleys, these towers appear like islands in a sea of cloud, their outlines faint, their forms softened by mist. To stand before one is to feel the presence of centuries, not noisy, not proud, but patient, steady, enduring. That the watchtower was both dwelling and fortress. Its walls were thick, built of stone or brick. Its base was square, strong, unyielding. Stairs led upward within, sometimes winding, sometimes straight, ending at the roof, where battlements opened to the horizon. From there, a soldier could see far into the distance, green valleys in summer, white snows in winter, the endless waves of steppe grass rippling under the wind. His eyes would search the far line where earth and sky meet, waiting for signs of dust or movement, for the faint shimmer of horsemen approaching. Inside the tower, life was slow. A garrison might be small, half a dozen men, perhaps more in larger posts. They cooked their meals in clay pots, rice or millet, sometimes dried meat or vegetables carried from nearby villages. They slept on straw mats, their armor stacked beside them, their weapons within reach. By day, they climbed to the top, scanning the horizon. By night, they tended fires, ready to send signals along the chain of towers. The signal system was simple, yet effective. A column of smoke by day could be seen for kilometers. At night, flames flickered like stars upon the ridges. One tower lit its fire, then the next, then the next. Messages leaping across hundreds of kilometers in the span of an hour. The system could warn of raids, call for reinforcements, or alert generals deep within the empire. Each fire was a word, each smoke a sentence. Together, they formed the language written upon the sky. But in truth, many days passed in silence. No horsemen came, no raids appeared. The towers simply stood, watching. Soldiers sat in the stillness, sharpening blades, mending clothes, telling stories. Some carved words into the stone, names that might endure long after their bones had turned to dust. Others leaned upon the battlements, staring at the mountains as the sun rose and set, the mist rolling up and down the valleys like an ocean. The towers themselves varied in shape and size. Some were small, little more than square platforms. Others were large, with arched windows, multiple levels, and space enough to house dozens of men. Many were placed where the land demanded them, at a mountain pass, a river crossing, or a high ridge from which valleys could be seen in every direction. In such places, the tower became more than a post. It was a sentinel, a guardian of the empire. Today, many of these towers still remain. Some stand proud, their walls solid, their stairs intact. Others are ruins, crumbling heaps of stone, their outlines barely visible against the hills. Yet even in ruin, they are beautiful. Mist drifts around them. Grass grows within their broken walls. Birds nest in their windows. They are no longer fortresses, no longer eyes of the empire. They are memories, resting quietly in the landscape. To imagine them in their prime is to feel both loneliness and strength. Loneliness, because the soldiers within live far from home, their days long and their company small. Strength, because Each tower was part of something greater, a chain that stretched across the land, linking mountain to mountain, valley to valley, empire to empire. Alone, the tower was nothing. Together, they formed the wall's watchful gaze. And so, when we picture the Great Wall, we must not think only of the endless ridges of stone, but also of these quiet sentinels. They are the punctuation marks of the wall, the pauses in its long sentence, the breath in its endless story. To walk along the wall is to pass from one tower to the next, like stepping from chapter to chapter, each one carrying echoes of voices long faded. As night falls in our imagination, we see a lone tower rising from the mist, its silhouette soft. Against the stars, a small fire glows upon its roof, the flame steady, the smoke curling upward. No enemy rides, no messenger comes. The tower simply watches, as it has watched for centuries. Silent and unblinking, its stones resting in the cool breath of time. The Great Wall stands in photographs, in paintings, in memory, as a monument of emperors and dynasties. We speak of Qin Shi Huang, of the Han generals, of the Ming commanders who planned and ordered its expansion. But the wall itself was not raised by rulers. It was lifted by hands calloused, tired, blistered hands. It was carried on shoulders bent beneath the weight of stone. It was stamped into shape by the feet of men and women whose names are forgotten, whose lives passed quietly into dust. If the wall is a monument, it is first and foremost a monument to labor. The laborers came from many walks of life. Some were soldiers, ordered to build in times of peace, their swords exchanged for shovels. Some were peasants, conscripted from villages, their farms left untended while they carried earth and stone. Some were convicts, their sentences paid not in coin or time, but in sweat and hardship, working off punishment with endless toil. And some were skilled artisans, masons and carpenters, who shaped stone, fired brick, and raised beams for watchtowers. Together, they formed the invisible army behind the wall's visible stones. The work was hard. In the mountains, stone had to be quarried, split, and carried up steep slopes. In the deserts, earth and reeds had to be pressed into layers, each one tamped until it hardened. In the plains, bricks had to be fired in kilns, each brick lifted and stacked by hand. The tools were simple wooden shovels, baskets woven of reeds, mallets of heavy wood, chisels of iron. Progress was slow yet steady. One layer of earth pressed down, one row of bricks laid, one tower rising course by course. Imagine a line of laborers stretching along a ridge. The sun is high, the air dry. Each man carries a stone upon his back, strapped with ropes. They climb, step by step, their feet slipping on loose soil, their breath short and harsh. At the top, the stones are set in place, one more piece in the wall's endless body. Then the men return down the slope to fetch another. The rhythm is slow, heavy, endless. Stone by stone, the wall grows. At night, the workers gathered in camps beside the wall. Fires burned low. Pots of millet bubbled. Smoke curled into the dark sky. Some men sang softly, their voices carrying into the hills. Others sat in silence, staring at the flames, their bodies aching. They slept on straw or upon the bare ground, dreaming perhaps of families far away. Some never returned to those families. Accidents claimed lives, falls from high ridges, stones slipping, sudden storms. Others were lost to hunger, exhaustion, or sickness. In the harshest accounts, the wall became their tomb, the earth covering their bodies, their bones mingling with the stones they had carried. Legends exaggerate this sorrow, telling of countless deaths, of tears so heavy they could bring the wall down. Yet even if the tales are embroidered, the truth remains that the wall was costly, not only in coin and time, but in human life. It is easy to see the grandeur of battlements against mountains, but less easy to hear the heartbeat of laborers who laid them, one breath at a time. And yet, despite hardship, there was endurance. The wall exists because hands did not stop. Day after day, through seasons and years, Workers lifted, tamped, carried, and stacked. Their strength became the wall's strength. Their patience became the wall's patience. Their silence became the wall's silence. When we look upon the wall today, we see not emperors, nor generals, nor dynasties, but the touch of ordinary people. The stones still bear the marks of chisels. The bricks still hold the fingerprints of those who shaped them. The towers still echo faintly with the voices of men who cooked their meals and shared their stories in their shadow. The wall is not only a monument of rulers, but also of workers, millions of hands, none remembered by name, yet all remembered in stone. Now, as we rest in thought, let us picture them not in suffering, but in stillness. The campfire flickers. The air is cool. A man leans back, his body weary, but his eyes turned upward toward the stars. The wall, half-built, stretches into the night. Around him, others sleep, their breath slow and steady. The earth is quiet. The stones rest. The silence is deep, but it is filled with presence, the presence of countless lives whose quiet work shaped the horizon itself. The Great Wall was never made of one single material. It was not always stone, nor always brick, nor always earth. It was built with what the land offered, what the laborers could reach, and what the emperors commanded. Each section is like a different verse in a long, quiet poem, its words written in soil, in rock, in fired clay, in timber cut from the forests. To walk along its length is to move through many forms, each shaped by geography and by time. In the earliest days, the wall was made of earth, simple soil, drawn from the ground itself, pressed and tapped into ridges. The method was basic, yet surprisingly durable. Layer upon layer of earth poured into wooden frames, then pounded with mallets or stamped by workers' feet until it hardened. Straw or reeds were sometimes mixed in, binding the layers together. When dry, the wall of earth stood firm, tall enough to hinder horsemen, wide enough for soldiers to patrol. Even now, more than 2,000 years later, traces of these earthen walls remain, softened by wind and rain, yet still recognizable as human effort pressed into land. In deserts, where soil was loose and sand shifted with every storm, builders wove reeds and brush into the layers, creating a pattern like pages in a book. Sand, reed, sand, reed. The wind could not scatter what was bound together in this way. The desert walls, though fragile in appearance, endured far longer than might be expected. Some sections of the Han Dynasty's desert walls still rise from the Gobi, their alternating layers visible like stripes in the sun. In mountains, the wall turned to stone. Here, stone was plentiful, lying in the very ridges it was meant to guard. Builders cut and carried blocks, setting them into place as foundations. In some sections, whole courses of stone formed the wall itself, heavy and immovable, hugging the lines of the mountains. Where the land was steep, stone gave both strength and stability, anchoring the wall so it would not slide away. The sound of chisels and hammers echoed across valleys, sharp against the wind. Each block, once cut, was lifted by ropes and hands, placed carefully beside its neighbor, one more piece in the endless body of the wall. Later, brick became the favored material, especially in the Ming Dynasty. Bricks could be shaped and fired to uniform size, easy to carry, easy to stack. They made the walls smoother, more regular, more enduring against time. Kilns burned day and night to produce them. Clay drawn from the earth molded and hardened. In fire, mortar was mixed from lime, sometimes strengthened with unusual ingredients. Legends even say glutinous rice paste was used, its stickiness binding the bricks with remarkable strength. Walk upon a Ming section of the wall, and you walk upon countless bricks, each one touched by hands, each one fired in flame, each one carrying the labor of its maker. Timber, too, played its part. Though the wall itself was seldom wood, towers and gates often required beams, scaffolding, and frames. Trees from nearby forests were cut, stripped, and shaped. their grain carrying the memory of growth rings into the architecture of empire. Wooden gates swung open and closed along the wall, creaking on hinges of iron, scaffolding of timber supported workers as they raised bricks higher and higher. Though most of this wood has long vanished, rotted, or burned, its presence once gave structure to the building of stone. Thus, the wall was not one material, but many: earth in the plains, stone in the mountains, brick in the heartlands, timber where beams were needed. It was a patchwork of what the land could offer, stitched together by the hands of laborers and bound by the will of emperors. Each part looked different, felt different, aged differently, yet together they formed a single vision, a barrier that stretched farther than any eye could see. To stand today upon the wall is to see this variation with your own eyes. In one place, bricks rise neatly, their mortar lines clean, their surface smooth beneath your feet. In another, the wall is a ridge of crumbling earth, grass growing upon its top, its edges blurred with centuries. In another still, stone steps climb steeply, their surfaces worn by countless footsteps. It is not one wall, it is many walls stitched into one story, and in that story the materials themselves become symbols. Earth the simplest, the most abundant, the first; stone the strongest, the most enduring, the backbone; brick the most deliberate, the most refined, the mark of order; timber the hidden helper, the skeleton of construction. Together they whisper that the wall is not uniform, but varied; not rigid, but adaptable. It is a monument of diversity, shaped by geography, by necessity, and by time. As we rest with this thought, let us imagine the wall at dusk, where different materials meet. A section of stone gives way to brick, an old earth ridge rises nearby, softened by grass. A wooden gate creaks faintly in the wind. The setting sun casts all of them in gold, uniting them in light. Though they were built in different ages by different hands, they stand together, silent, patient, waiting for night to fall. The great wall changes with the seasons. In spring, grasses climb its slopes. In summer, the stones grow hot beneath the sun. In autumn, golden leaves scatter across its battlements. But in winter, when snow drapes the ridges, when the air is sharp and clean, the wall takes on a special stillness. It becomes quieter, softer, and yet somehow more eternal, as though it has stepped outside of time itself. Snow gathers upon the battlements, rounding the sharp edges of stone. Watchtowers rise like pale silhouettes, their outlines softened, their roofs crowned in white. From a distance, the wall looks less like a fortress and more like a path of frost, winding endlessly across mountains, its gray stones and white snow blending into one long river. The sky above is pale, the clouds heavy, the air filled with silence so complete that even a single crow's cry seems vast for soldiers who once kept watch in winter. The cold was both companion and enemy. Their armor grew stiff, their fingers numb, their fires small against the endless chill. They huddled within towers, wrapped in furs, their breath rising in faint clouds outside. The snow muffled every sound. Hoofbeats could not carry far, footsteps sank into drifts, voices were swallowed. To guard the wall in winter was to live in solitude, surrounded by silence deeper than any stone. Yet the snow gave beauty, even to hardship. A watchman climbing the tower steps might pause at the top, gazing out upon mountains painted in white, valleys buried in silver shadow, ridges glowing faintly beneath a weak sun. For a moment, even his burden might feel lighter, his duty less heavy, as though the wall itself had become part of nature, no longer only a human creation, but a mountain of stone and frost, inseparable from the land it crossed. For the laborers who built in winter, the cold was harsher still. Earth was frozen, stone slippery with ice, hands raw from wind. Yet the work did not stop. Fires were lit to thaw clay for bricks, water fetched and quickly frozen before it could be used. Progress was slower, each step heavier, but still the wall grew, even in the stillness of snow. When night fell, camps huddled close to the wall, their fires flickering weakly against the vast dark. The stars above were sharp and cold, their light falling upon the ridges like frost of heaven. Legends tell that in deep winter, the wall itself seemed alive. Wind howled through its gaps, moaning like voices of the dead. Snow piled against its base, burying pathways, covering stones, until the wall blended into the mountain. Travelers spoke of walking beside the wall and losing sight of it, as though it had dissolved into the whiteness, leaving only silence behind. Some said the wall in winter was a bridge to the heavens, each tower a frozen lantern guiding spirits rather than soldiers. Even now, when snow falls upon the great wall, it transforms. The crowds grow fewer, the noise subsides, only the sound of crunching footsteps remains, slow and soft. The wall itself seems to exhale, its stones cooling, its ancient body resting beneath a white blanket. Tourists who visit in summer see a monument of grandeur. Those who come in winter see a monument of peace. And so, as we imagine it tonight, the wall is covered in snow. No soldiers stand watch, no raiders ride, no laborers toil. Only the wall remains, rising and falling with the mountains, its towers, crowned in white, its stones silent under frost. It does not resist the snow, it accepts it. It does not fight the cold, it rests within it. The great wall in winter is not a barrier, but a lullaby, soft, pale, endless, and quiet. The great wall is not only a structure of earth, brick, and stone. It is also a vessel of memory, carrying within its long body the stories people told about it over centuries. Myths and legends gathered along its length like mist along a mountain ridge. They were told by workers at campfires, by soldiers during long watches, by travelers resting beneath towers. They softened the hardness of stone, giving the wall a soul, turning it from mere defense into a place of dreams and sorrow. The most famous of these stories is that of Mengjongyo, the woman whose tears brought down the wall. Her tale has many variations, but the heart is always the same. Her husband was taken to labor on the wall, and he never returned. She traveled far to find him, only to learn that he had died and been buried within the stones. Overcome with grief, she wept at the wall, and her sorrow was so deep, her tears so endless, that a section of the wall collapsed, revealing his bones. It is a tale of love and loss, of the human cost hidden within the wall's grandeur. Some tell it as protest against harsh rulers, others as a lament for the countless nameless laborers. But always it is remembered, because it speaks to the heart. Other legends tell of dragons. In one, the wall follows the back of a sleeping dragon, its ridges nearing the creature's spine as it winds across mountains. The people, it was said, built where the dragon showed them to build, following its path. To this day, when seen from afar, the wall does look like a dragon stretched across the hills, its body coiling, its tail vanishing into the horizon. In the mist of dawn, its towers might even seem like the dragon's scales catching faint light as it stirs in dreams. Some stories speak of ghosts. They say the souls of workers who died upon the wall wander still, their sighs carried on the wind, their shapes glimpsed in fog. Soldiers keeping watch told of hearing footsteps when none were near, of voices calling faintly from the valleys. In winter nights, the wall seemed to moan with the wind, as though mourning the lives it had taken. Such tales made the wall not only a fortress but also a haunted threshold, a place where the living and the dead brushed shoulders. In villages near the wall, smaller tales grew. Children whispered that fox spirits danced upon its stones by moonlight. Travelers spoke of strange lights moving along the battlements, flames that flickered though no fire had been lit. Some said these were beacons tended by unseen hands, warnings from another world. Others said they were only tricks of wind and reflection, the imagination of tired eyes. But still, the stories were told, and they gave the wall a mystery beyond its physical presence. Even emperors were not free of legend. Some accounts claim that the wall's very course was guided by fate, by omens seen in stars and by the will of heaven. The emperors who built or repaired it were not merely rulers, but caretakers of destiny, entrusted to maintain the line between order and chaos, civilization and wilderness. The wall became more than a boundary. It became a symbol of cosmic balance, as though its stones helped keep the heavens and the earth aligned. Today, when visitors walk the Great Wall, they may not hear these stories spoken aloud, but they linger. In the silence, the tale of Meng Zhongyu is remembered in statues and plays. The dragon can still be seen in the ridges of the land. The ghosts are felt in the stillness of ruined towers. The myths survive because they were born from truth, not literal truth, but emotional truth. The wall is too vast, too demanding, too ancient to be understood only in stone. It needs stories, and the people gave them. As we rest in imagination, the wall lies before us under moonlight. A lone woman stands weeping in legend, her tears falling upon stone. A dragon sleeps beneath the ridges, its spine stretching into the stars. A faint fire glows on a tower where no man keeps watch. The wind carries whispers that might be only air or might be voices. The wall is silent, but in its silence stories breathe. The Great Wall has always been more than a line of defense. Though it was raised by laborers, directed by generals, and ordered by emperors, it became something larger, an emblem, a sign, a mirror of the nation itself. Over centuries, people began to see the wall not only as a structure but as a symbol, a presence that represented China's endurance, its boundaries, and its spirit. From its earliest days, the wall was a line between worlds. Within lay fields, rivers, and villages, life ordered by law, shaped by agriculture, gathered beneath the emperor's rule. Beyond lay the steppe, the mountains, the shifting horizons of riders and nomads, untamed and unpredictable. The wall was the threshold, the dividing line, the mark that said, "Here is China." It defined the empire not only in land but in imagination. To live south of the wall was to belong to the realm of civilization. To live beyond it was to belong to another world entirely. This idea persisted through dynasties. Though the wall was sometimes neglected, sometimes rebuilt, sometimes broken, its image remained constant. It was spoken of in poems, painted in scrolls, remembered in stories. Scholars described it as a shield, emperors invoked it as a sign of their vigilance, and travelers wrote of its immensity as proof of the empire's strength. Each time someone looked upon it, they did not see only stone. They saw China itself, stretching across mountains, patient and unyielding. In later centuries, long after dynasties had passed, the wall became a national symbol in still another sense. Foreign visitors arriving from lands far away marveled at it. To them, it seemed almost otherworldly, a barrier so vast that no single lifetime could capture it. They wrote about it in books, brought its image back to their own countries, and slowly the Great Wall became known beyond China as the very emblem of the nation. It was not only China's symbol to itself, but China's face to the outside world. In modern times, the wall has been spoken of as a heritage of all Chinese people, a shared monument that belongs to the past and future alike. Though much of it lies in ruins, overgrown by grass, its restored sections stand proudly as icons. It appears on stamps, in paintings, in films, in the minds of school children. The phrase "Wan Li Chang Cheng," the 10,000-Li wall, is still spoken with pride, not as a mere fortification, but as an image of perseverance. But what does a symbol mean when the stones themselves are silent? Perhaps it means that people always seek reflections of themselves in what they build. The wall, stretching endlessly, reflects the endurance of a culture that has weathered centuries. Its towers, rising above mist, reflect vigilance and patience. Its winding ridges, seen from afar, reflect the idea of China as vast, ancient, and unbroken. And yet, the wall is not only grandeur. In its symbol there is also humility. It is imperfect. It crumbles, it bends with the land. It was built by countless, ordinary hands not remembered by name. Its strength lies not in a single moment, but in the persistence of generations. In this way, it symbolizes not only empire, but people, not only rulers, but labors, not only boundaries, but endurance. Tonight, as we imagine it under a pale sky, the Great Wall does not boast. It does not shout of power or conquest. It simply rests, a long line across the hills, a quiet reminder of what can be built when patience meets time. In that quietness, it is perhaps the truest symbol of all, not loud, not fierce, but enduring. Though the Great Wall stretches like a ribbon across mountains and deserts, it is at the passes, those narrow gates between ridges, those doorways in the barrier, that history most often gathered. A wall, after all, must allow passage. Caravans needed routes, armies needed roads, emperors needed gateways to the world beyond. And so, at certain points, great passes were built, fortified with gates and towers, guarded by soldiers, watched day and night. These passes were the wall's most vulnerable places, but also its strongest. They were not simple openings. They were fortresses, layered with gates, walls, and watchtowers. To approach one was to see stone rising in stages, each line stronger than the last, each corner designed to trap and funnel attackers. Inside, barracks housed soldiers, granaries stored food, and armories held weapons. To the weary traveler, they were thresholds. To the weary soldier, they were strongholds. Among the most famous is Shanhaiguan, the first pass under heaven, where the wall meets the Bohai Sea. Here the wall stretches to the shore, its stones dipping into the waves, a line between land and water. For centuries, this pass was the eastern gate of the empire. Guarding the approach to Beijing, armies marched through its archways, banners streaming, drums beating. In moments of danger, its gates slammed shut, iron-bound doors echoing like thunder. Farther west lies Jiaguan, the last pass under heaven, where the Ming Wall ends in the desert. Beyond it stretch sands and silence, the beginning of the vast Silk Road. Here traders departed with caravans, carrying silk and porcelain toward distant lands. Here too armies camped, waiting to march into or out of the empire. Its fortress still stands, towers rising above desert hills, walls curving like an embrace against the emptiness. At such passes, battles were sometimes fought. Raiders from the steppe tested the gates, charging with horse and bow. Defenders rained arrows from above, rolled stones from parapets, lit beacons to summon help. The clash was fierce, but brief. For all its grandeur, the Great Wall was not a stage for endless war. Most days were quiet. Soldiers drilled, watched, patrolled, yet in memory. It is the battles that echo, remembered in chronicles, carved into legend. One might picture such a battle in imagination, though gently, without noise. The morning mist hangs low, riders approach from beyond, their banners dark against pale sky. Drums sound from the fortress, horns echo from the towers. Arrows rise and fall, silent in our draining. Stones crash from above. Then silence again, as mist swallows the scene. The pass endures, the wall endures, the mountains endure. Even in times of peace, the passes were alive with movement. Merchants lined at gates, their carts heavy with goods. Officials checked documents, recorded names, weighed taxes. Farmers brought supplies to soldiers. Children played in the shadow of the towers. A pass was never empty. It was a place of exchange, a crossing where cultures brushed against one another, sometimes in trade, sometimes in conflict, always in the watchful presence of stone. Today, many of these passes remain. Shanhaiguan still stands at the sea, its inscription of first pass under heaven carved above the gate. Jiaguan still looks out upon the desert, its walls glowing golden in the setting sun. Tourists walk their courtyards, climb their towers, gaze out at horizons once filled with dust and armies. Yet the battles are gone, only silence remains, broken by footsteps and wind. The passes remind us that the Great Wall was not only a barrier, but also a threshold. It kept danger out, but it also allowed life to flow through. It guarded, but it also welcomed. It was a fortress, and it was a gate. In this, as in all things, it carried dual meanings, strength and vulnerability, exclusion and connection, silence and memory. And so, as night falls upon our imagination, we see a past beneath the stars. Its gates are closed, but not hostile. Its towers rise like quiet guardians, their outlines softened by moonlight. The battlefield is gone. The merchants are gone. Only the walls remain, patient as ever, their stones glowing faintly in the stillness. The Great Wall was never only a line of battlements stretching through emptiness. Along its length, nestled in valleys, perched on ridges, or resting at the foot of towers, there were villages, small communities, that lived in the shadow of stone. These villages gave life to the wall, just as the wall gave shape to their days. To imagine the Great Wall without them is to imagine a road without footsteps, a hearth without flame. The villagers were farmers, herders, craftsmen, and families who dwelt near the frontier. Their fields reached toward the wall, rows of millet or wheat waving beneath the wind, their homes built of mud brick or timber, smoke curling gently from clay chimneys. Chickens clucked in courtyards, goats wandered narrow paths, children laughed as they chased one another beside the ancient stones. The wall loomed nearby, but to them it was not always a fortress. It was simply part of the landscape, as constant as the mountain or the river. For many, life was quiet, marked by the rhythm of seasons. In spring they planted, in summer they tended, in autumn they harvested, in winter they huddled by the fire, repairing tools, telling stories of emperors and warriors, of ghosts that haunted the towers, of heroes who defended the gates. Soldiers patrolled above, but the villagers lived below, their worlds intertwined yet separate. The wall was their neighbor, sometimes protective, sometimes burdensome, always present. Trade passed through these villages. Merchants leading caravans might stop for food and rest. A blacksmith might mend a soldier's spearhead. A potter might sell bowls for the garrisons. Markets grew near gates, where villagers and travelers mingled. Spices scented the air, silks glimmered in the sun, coins clinked softly in hands. To live near the wall was to live near movement, to see the world flow by even as your own life remained steady. But there was also hardship. To dwell near the frontier was to face danger when raids came. Sometimes riders swept across the fields, leaving smoke and loss. Sometimes soldiers took supplies, conscripted labor, or demanded service. The wall might shield, but it also weighed heavily. Still, villagers endured, as they always do, shaping their lives around what could not be changed. Their loyalty to the soil beneath their feet was stronger than fear, and so their homes stood, year after year, in the wall's long shadow. Today, traces of such villages remain: crumbled walls, worn foundations, pottery shards half buried in earth. In some places, villages still live on, their houses standing close to ancient battlements. Chickens still wander, children still play, and smoke still curls from chimneys, as it has for centuries. To visit such a place is to feel time blur the wall towering above, carrying the weight of empires, while below, life continues in the simplest rhythms of family and field. As we rest with this image, the wall does not seem lonely. It is no longer only a barrier, but a companion. It stands quietly beside the villages, watching generations grow, age, and pass. Its stones hold memory, but the villages give it warmth, the warmth of meals cooked, of fires tended, of songs sung in the evening. The wall is ancient, but the villages remind us that history is not only towers and battles. It is also bread, laughter, and the daily hum of life. And so, as night falls, in imagination, we picture a small village beside the wall. The fields are quiet, the animals asleep. A lantern glows faintly in a window. Smoke drifts upward from a chimney, vanishing into the starry sky. Above, the Great Wall lies in silence, a ridge of stone against the mountain. Below, the village rests, its people dreaming together. Wall and village breathe the same night air, bound by centuries of shared existence. The Great Wall was never built in isolation. It was not only the creation of emperors and laborers, it was also shaped by those who lived beyond it, the nomadic peoples of the steppe. To understand the wall, we must understand that it was raised as a line of meeting and separation, a boundary between two great ways of life, the settled farmers of the valleys and the wandering horsemen of the grasslands. The steppe stretched northward in an endless expanse, a sea of grass beneath an endless sky. There, people lived not in walled towns but in tents of felt, moving with the seasons, following herds of sheep, horses, and cattle. Their lives were bound to the horizon, to freedom of movement, to the rhythm of hooves upon earth. Skilled archers, they could loose arrows while galloping, striking swiftly before vanishing again into open land. To those within the wall, they were both admired and feared, admired for their strength, feared for their raids. The wall rose in answer to this tension. It was not a perfect defense, more could it ever be, but it was a line of resistance. Its towers watched the plains, its garrisons waited for horsemen, its gates controlled the flow of trade. For every emperor, the nomads beyond the wall were both threat and necessity. They raided, but they also traded. They fought, but they also exchanged gifts, horses, and ideas. The wall stood between them, but it also connected them. For every boundary is also a meeting place. Different peoples came and went across the centuries. The Xiongnu in the Han era, fierce riders who pressed hard against China's northern border. The Turkic tribes in later centuries, whose power stretched across Central Asia. The Khitan and Jurchen in the Song dynasty, who built their own states near the frontier. The Mongols, whose empires swept across the world in the 13th century. The Mongols, who would eventually pass through the wall and claim all of China. Each in turn looked upon the wall, sometimes with respect, sometimes with scorn, sometimes as obstacle, sometimes as gateway. To imagine the meeting of wall and steppe is to picture two worlds side by side. On one side, fields of millet, villages of mud brick, officials recording taxes, soldiers standing watch. On the other, open plains, tents that can be folded and carried, herds grazing, warriors mounted on swift horses. The wall does not erase their differences, it emphasizes them. It says, here is order, there is freedom. Here is permanence, there is movement. Here is stone, there is sky. And yet, there was exchange. Nomads brought horses, essential for Chinese armies. They brought furs, livestock, and goods from distant lands. In return, they received silk, grain, and iron. Sometimes the exchange was peaceful, arranged at gates under watchful eyes. Sometimes it was forced, following raids and battles. The wall was both a barrier and a market stall, a place of fear and of necessity. For the villagers who lived near the frontier, the nomads were both neighbors and strangers. They might see riders cresting the horizon, their banners snapping in the wind. Sometimes it meant danger, sometimes it meant trade. Always it reminded them that the world beyond the wall was vast, untamed, and never far away. Legends tell of moments when nomadic leaders stood at the wall, gazing at its towers. Some are said to have scoffed, saying that walls cannot stop riders, that rivers and winds cannot be walled. Others saw it as respect, an admission that China feared their strength. Perhaps both are true. For all its grandeur, the wall could not stop the flow of history. Nomads crossed it, passed through its gates, even conquered the empires that built it. Yet the wall endured, even after victories and defeats faded, even after dynasties fell. Today, when we look at the Great Wall winding across grassland hills, it still feels like a dialogue between two worlds. On one side, the memory of fields and villages. On the other, the memory of riders and tents. The wall remains as the quiet line where they met, where they clashed, where they traded, where they shaped one another. And so, as we imagine it tonight, the wall stands at the edge of the steppe. The grass ripples like waves beneath the moon. A faint wind carries the sound of hooves far away. The watchtower is silent. The stones glow softly in the starlight. No riders charge. No soldiers march. Only the wall and the grasslands breathe together, bound by history, divided yet forever entwined. The Great Wall was not only stone and watchtowers, it was also sound for the soldiers who lived upon it. The days were marked not by clocks or calendars, but by the steady beat of drums and the clear call of horns. These were the voices of the garrison, the rhythm of duty, the heartbeat of the frontier. Though the drums are long silent, their echoes still seem to linger in the stillness of ruined towers, faint as memory, deep as time. A garrison upon the wall might number only a handful of men, or sometimes dozens, or even hundreds at the great passes. They lived in barracks of stone or in wooden rooms built within the towers. Their lives were strict, their days ordered by routine. At dawn, a drum would sound a slow, heavy beat rolling across the ridges. Soldiers stirred from their mats, strapped on armor, took their posts. At dusk, another drum, marking the closing of gates, the lighting of beacons, the beginning of night watch. In times of danger, the drums became urgent. Their rhythm quickened, calling men to arms. The sound rolled through valleys, echoed against cliffs, carried across fields. It was joined by the sharp call of horns, long, hollow notes rising into the sky, warnings that spread faster than footsteps. At night, fire joined sound, beacons flaring on tower tops, the glow of flame answering drum and horn. Together, they formed the language of vigilance, telling of raids, of summons, of alarm. Yet for most days, the drums were not calls to battle but simply markers of time. A slow beat for guard change, a steady rhythm for patrols, sometimes even a ceremonial beat, as officials inspected the wall or messengers passed through the gates. For the soldiers, the drums were constant companions, their deep thuds mixed with the whistle of wind, the creak of gates, the soft murmur of conversation. Life in the garrisons was not glamorous. Soldiers trained, patrolled, cooked simple meals, mended clothes, sharpened blades. They wrote letters home, though many never reached their families. They carved names into stone, small marks of their presence on a vast wall. At night, they sat in groups, eating from shared pots, telling stories in the flicker of fire. Outside, the wall stretched silent, but within, the drums gave a pulse, a reminder that life, even on the lonely frontier, had rhythm. Sometimes, during great parades or inspections, the sound must have been overwhelming. Hundreds of drums beating in unison, horns blaring, banners rippling. The wall itself seemed to tremble with the rhythm, as if the mountains were alive with marching footsteps. For the soldiers, such moments must have been both pride and burden, a reminder of duty, but also of belonging to something vast. Today, when we walk the wall, there are no drums. The only sounds are wind, birds, footsteps. Yet if you stand in a ruined tower, close your eyes and listen. You may imagine them, a faint thud, steady as a heartbeat, a horn's call fading into the distance, an echo carried not by air, but by memory. The wall may be silent, but the garrisons are not forgotten, and so, as night falls in our imagination, we picture a tower under stars. A drum rests in shadow, its skin stretched taut, its sticks worn smooth by use. No hand strikes it now, but once it commanded the rhythm of lives. Its silence is deep, but within that silence, the echoes remain, echoes of duty, echoes of vigilance, echoes of the human heartbeat that once kept pace with the stones. The Great Wall is often remembered as a fortress, a shield against raids, a monument of defense, but it was also a witness to journeys of merchants, pilgrims, and envoys who passed through its gates as they traveled along the Silk Road. For centuries, caravans wound across deserts and mountains, carrying goods, ideas, and stories. The wall stood nearby, watching silently as the world moved between east and west. The Silk Road was not one road, but many paths. Some led through the Gobi Desert, others through the passes of Gansu, others still along fertile valleys. Together, they formed a web that linked China to Central Asia, to Persia, to India, and beyond to distant lands. Along this web moved caravans, long lines of camels and horses, laden with silk, porcelain, paper, jade. In return came glass, silver, spices, wool, and knowledge from faraway cultures. At certain points, the wall and the Silk Road touched. Gates in the wall became thresholds of trade. The most famous was Yumengwan, the Jade Gate, where caravans left the empire's heartlands and entered the western deserts. Another was Yangguan, the Sun Gate, near which poets later wrote of partings and long journeys. These gates were guarded by soldiers, but they were also tended by officials who checked goods, recorded taxes, and ensured that order held at the frontier. Imagine such a caravan arriving at a gate. The sun is low, the horizon dusty with light. Camels kneel, their saddles creaking under heavy loads. Traders speak in many tongues: Chinese, Persian, perhaps languages from even farther away. Soldiers inspect bundles of silk, rolls of paper, baskets of tea. Officials record each item, their brushes moving across bamboo slips or paper scrolls. The gate is opened, its wooden doors groaning. Beyond lies the desert, vast and empty. The next stage of the journey. The wall was not merely a barrier here. It was a meeting place. Cultures brushed against one another. Ideas passed quietly, hidden in conversation. A Buddhist monk from India might exchange words with a Chinese pilgrim. A Persian merchant might trade glass for silk. A soldier wall might taste foreign spice for the first time. These were small moments, but together they shaped history. The wall, in its silence, became a silent host to the mingling of worlds. And yet, the wall was also a reminder of fragility. The road was long, the deserts harsh, the mountains perilous. The wall gave protection at the threshold, but once caravans moved beyond, they faced weeks of open land where storms first and bandits lurked. Travelers wrote of the relief of seeing the wall again upon their return, its towers rising like familiar guardians at the edge of wilderness. To them, it was not only stone, but safety, civilization, home. Even in poetry, the wall and the Silk Road are intertwined. Tang poets wrote of partings at Yangguan, where friends bid farewell to those departing westward. Their verses speak not of armies or emperors, but of the quiet sorrow of goodbyes, of the uncertainty of long roads, of the hope of safe return. The wall, in these poems, is not fierce but tender backdrop to human emotion, to the timeless ache of separation. Today, those gates still stand. Though many are worn, their wood long vanished, their stones weathered by sand and time. Yet to walk among them is to feel the weight of passage. You can almost hear the bells of camels, the murmur of merchants, the sigh of soldiers at their posts. The wall remembers, even if silently. As we imagine it now, the wall lies under a starry sky, its gate closed but glowing faintly in moonlight. A caravan rests nearby, camels folded in the sand, their loads heavy but secure. Merchants sleep under blankets, their breath rising into the cool night air. Soldiers stand watch, their silhouettes come against the battlements. The desert is vast, the road is long. But for this night, there is stillness. The wall, the caravan, the stars all breathing together in silence. The Great Wall is not only a monument of stone and earth, but also of seasons. For more than 2,000 years, it has endured the turning of time, watching spring blossoms open, summer suns burn, autumn leaves scatter, and winter snows fall. Each season touches the wall differently, painting it in new colors, cloaking it in new moods. To walk along its ridges is to walk through the calendar of nature, one step carrying the memory of countless years. In spring, the wall softens. The air is cool, the hillsides green, wildflowers pushing up between the stones. Birds return, their calls echoing from tower to tower. Farmers in nearby villages plant their fields, their plows cutting furrows not far from the battlements. Soldiers once stood at their posts in the season, their eyes scanning horizons alive with new growth, their armor glinting in pale sunlight. The wall itself seems to wake from slumber, its stones warmed after long months of frost, its ridges crowned with blossoms that drift upon the wind. In summer, the wall grows hot and heavy. The sun blazes, the stones radiate warmth beneath the feet, and the air shimmers with heat. In the mountains, the wall winds like a dark thread through green forests, cicadas buzzing loudly in the trees. In the deserts, it lies under a white sky, its tamped earth ridges glowing golden against dunes. Soldiers of old suffered in this season, their armor stifling, their watch endless under the sun. Yet summer also brought harvests of grain, caravans, heavy with goods, villages bustling with life. The wall endured the heat, its stones expanding, its towers holding firm, patient as always. In autumn, the wall becomes golden, leaves turn amber and crimson, drifting against gray battlements. The air is cool and clear, the sky wide and deep. This was the season of harvest, when villagers gathered crops, when soldiers stored supplies for the cold months ahead. Poets often wrote of the wall in autumn, for its towers silhouetted against crisp skies seemed both strong and sorrowful. It was a season of beauty, but also of endings, of farewells at the gates, of caravans departing westward, of soldiers gazing northward at the fading light. In winter, the wall is silent. Snow crowns its battlements, frost etches its stones, and the mountains it crosses lie hushed beneath a pale sky. Fires once burned within towers, soldiers huddled close, their breath rising in faint clouds. The cold was bitter, but the wall stood patient, its stones hardened, its lines softened by snow. To see the wall in winter is to see it at its most, eternal gray stone against white silence, a monument of endurance resting beneath the stars. The wall has known not one cycle of seasons, but thousands. It has watched spring return more times than we can count. Summer suns blaze and fade, autumn leaves fall into dust, winter snows melt into rivers. It has endured not years, but centuries of cycles, each one folding into the next, each one leaving its quiet trace. Its stones are marked not only by chisels and footsteps, but by rain, frost, wind, and sun. To us, a season is a fleeting time. To the wall, seasons are only moments. Spring comes, blossoms fall. Summer burns, autumn glows, winter rests, and still the wall remains unhurried, unchanged in its patience. The wall is not only a monument of human hands, but also of nature's rhythm. Its endurance is bound not only to emperors, but also to the turning of earth beneath the sky, and so, as we imagine it tonight, the wall lies beneath the stars. Surrounded by the memory of all seasons, we see blossoms drifting in spring air. We feel the sun of summer upon warm stones. We hear autumn leaves rustling against battlements. We watch snow falling softly upon towers. The wall holds them all within itself, each season resting upon its stones, each season passing, each season returning, while the wall endures in silence. When day fades and the last glow of sun leaves the mountains, the great wall does not vanish. Instead, it changes. The noise of footsteps, the voices of visitors, the hum of daily life all fall silent. The towers, so solid in daylight, become silhouettes against the dark. The stones cool, their heat from the sun fading slowly into the night air, and above it all, the stars appear countless, steady, eternal. The wall, which once carried the burdens of armies and emperors, becomes a quiet path beneath the heavens. At night, the wall feels endless, without horizon, without the distraction of valleys and trees. It is only a ribbon of shadow winding across the ridges. The stars give it shape, outlining its towers, tracing its battlements in faint silver light. Sometimes the moon glows bright, washing the stones in pale radiance, making the wall gleam as though carved from frost. Other nights the sky is dark, The stars, sharp and cold, scattered like jewels across blackness. In such moments, the wall seems small against the universe, and yet also eternal, a patient companion to the sky itself. For the soldiers who once kept watch, the stars were familiar. Friends, they guided travelers, told of times passing, and gave comfort in the long hours of silence. A soldier leaning upon the battlement might whisper names to the constellations, the same names his father once spoke. He might watch the North Star, fixed above, a reminder of direction and duty. He might see meteors flash across the horizon, and take them as omens of raids, of fortunes, of destinies far beyond his own. In legend, the stars and the wall are often linked. Some stories say the Milky Way above is a reflection of the Great Wall below, one built of light, the other of stone. One lies in heaven, one upon earth, both winding endlessly across distance. To gaze upward is to see the wall of stars, to gaze downward is to see the wall of men. The two mirror one another, silent, vast, and timeless. Travelers who camped near the wall must have felt this connection deeply. Imagine a caravan resting by a gate, camels folded upon the sand, fires burning, low merchants wrapped in blankets. Above them, the wall rises, and above the wall, the sky spreads without end. Conversations fade, sleep comes, and only the stars remain awake, keeping watch alongside the towers. The wall guarded the land, but the sky guarded the wall, endless, over endless, silence over silence. Today, when modern travelers walk the wall at night, they feel something similar. Far from the cities, where lights do not dim the sky, the stars appear as they must have centuries ago. The battlements are empty, the towers hollow, but the air is alive with starlight. Footsteps slow, voices hush, and the wall becomes more than stone. It becomes a path of dreamers, each one walking not through history alone, but through the universe. The stars remind us that the wall is both vast and small. Vast because it stretches for thousands of kilometers, the longest structure ever built by human hands. Small because even at its greatest, it is only a line upon the earth, while the stars stretch beyond measure. And yet, when seen together, they feel united. The wall climbs mountains as the constellations climb the sky. The towers rise as the stars rise. Both endure, both shine, both rest in silence. And so, as we imagine it tonight, the wall lies beneath the heavens, its stones cool, its towers dark, its battlements empty. Above, the stars glow faintly, steady as breaths. The Milky Way arches overhead, a river of light reflecting the river of stone below. No drums sound, no horns call, no riders ride. Only the wall and the stars remain, bound in stillness, sharing the same quiet eternity. The Great Wall may seem eternal when we gaze upon its ridges, but in truth, it has always been fragile. Stone and brick, though strong, yield to rain. Earth, though crushed and tamped, yields to wind. Wood, though cut and shaped, yields to time. For more than 2,000 years, the wall has lived in cycles, built and broken, restored and ruined, strengthened and forgotten. Its story is not one of permanence, but of persistence, carried through the hands of those who repaired what others had left behind. The earliest walls of earth were always vulnerable. Seasons wore them down, storms softened their edges, roots of plants broke them apart, dynasties that neglected them watched them crumble, little by little, until they returned to the soil from which they had been raised. In the Han Dynasty, old Qin walls were repaired and extended. In the Tang Han, walls were patched again. In the Song, bricks replaced broken earth. In the Ming, stone rose where earlier structures had faded. Each dynasty inherited fragments and left fragments in turn, like caretakers passing a relic from hand to hand, yet even the strongest restorations could not prevent decay. The Ming Wall, with its solid stone foundations and brick battlements, has lasted longer than most. Still, time gnaws even at its strength. Storms crack mortar, earthquakes shift stones, roots creep into seams, towers collapse, walls fall away. Ridges are covered in grass. In some places, villagers, over the centuries, carried bricks away to build their homes, their wells, their barns. To them, the wall was not a monument, but a quarry, a ready source of stone for daily life. In times of war, destruction came faster. Gates were broken, towers burned, battlements smashed. Soldiers, who once defended the wall, sometimes dismantled it themselves, salvaging material, abandoning posts. The wall could not resist not only enemies, but also the slow erosion of neglect. And yet, even as parts fell, others were rebuilt. Emperors sent orders for repairs, new bricks fired, new stones laid, old gaps filled. Officials recorded each restoration, proud of their work, marking towers with inscriptions of dates and names. These inscriptions can still be found today, carved into stone, weathered but legible, testifying to centuries of care. In modern times, the wall has entered yet another cycle: restoration for memory rather than defense. Sections near Beijing have been rebuilt, their stones polished, their towers made whole again. Tourists walk these stretches, climbing steps that seem new though they rise upon ancient foundations. Other sections, far from cities, remain untouched ruins. Overgrown with weeds, stones collapsed into valleys, towers leaning against time. Both are real, the restored and the ruined, the remembered and the forgotten. To walk the restored wall is to see grandeur, to feel the might of stone against mountain, to understand why it became a symbol of endurance. To walk the ruined wall is to feel tenderness, to see how fragile even the greatest works of men truly are. The broken stones, the grass-grown ridges, the fallen towers all whisper of time's patience, of how empires rise and fall but the earth endures. Perhaps this is the true story of the wall, not that it was built once perfect and eternal, but that it was built again and again, cared for, abandoned, cared for once more. It is not the permanence of stone that defines it, but the persistence of human hands, returning across centuries to lift it once more against the sky. As we imagine it tonight, the wall lies half whole, half broken. A tower nearby is strong, its battlements clear, its windows open to the horizon. Another tower farther on is a ruin, its stones collapsed into grass, its shadow fading into twilight. Between them lies the truth of the wall, part memory, part presence, part dream. It is not perfect, but it endures. It does not resist time, but it lingers within it. For those who lived within China, the Great Wall was a familiar presence, sometimes taken for granted, sometimes feared, sometimes admired. But for travelers and explorers who arrived from distant lands, the wall was a marvel, a vision beyond expectation. To them, it seemed both strange and immense, unlike anything they had known in their homelands. Their words, written in journals and reports, carried the wall's image far across deserts and seas, so that even those who never touched its stones could imagine it in their dreams. The first travelers who saw the wall came not as tourists, but as envoys, merchants, and wanderers along the Silk Road. For them, the wall was both barrier and gateway. At its gates, they were inspected, their goods recorded, their papers checked. Beyond the wall lay the empire, vast and orderly. Behind them lay deserts and steppes, wild and wide. They described it not only as a fortification, but as a threshold between two worlds. To pass through was to step from one kind of life into another. In later centuries, when Western travelers reached China, the wall became one of the most written about wonders. Some were astonished by its length, stretching farther than the eye could follow, winding like a dragon across mountains. Others doubted it at first, thinking it a legend exaggerated in story, until they stood upon its stones and felt its scale beneath their feet. Still others wrote of its towers rising above mist, of its steps climbing steep ridges, of the silence that clung to it at night. Not all words were of praise. Some explorers noted its ruins, its gaps, its sections swallowed by earth and time. They remarked that, though great, it could not stop invasions. that it was beautiful but imperfect, grand but fragile. Yet even in criticism, they acknowledged its power, for no one could look upon the wall without feeling its presence. Artists who traveled painted it in scrolls and sketches. Some drew its battlements against golden sunsets, others traced its line across snow-covered hills. Their works carried the wall into galleries and books, letting those who never journeyed east see its form. For many in faraway lands, the first image of China they ever knew was not a city or a palace, but the Great Wall winding across silent ridges. For Chinese travelers, too, the wall became a subject of pilgrimage. Scholars journeyed to see its famous gates. Poets wrote of standing upon its stones. Emperors themselves inspected its fortresses. They described feelings not of foreign wonder, but of reflection, of standing upon a monument of their own history, of hearing the whispers of their ancestors in the quiet of towers. Today, countless visitors from every corner of the world walk the restored stretches. They climb its steep steps, pause at its towers, gaze out at horizons. They take photographs, but more importantly, they feel the immensity, the way it dwarfs the human figure, the way it seems endless against mountains. In their silence, they join the long line of travelers before them, carrying the memory of the wall outward once again. What is remarkable is that each traveler sees the wall differently. For some, it is strength, for others sorrow. For some, it is history, for others beauty. But all agree that it is unforgettable. Even in ruin, even in silence, it impresses itself upon the mind like a shadow that lingers long after the traveler has gone. And so, as we imagine it tonight, we stand not as builders, not as soldiers, but as travelers. We climb slowly up the steep steps, our breath steady, our hands brushing cool stone. At the top, we look outward. The mountains are endless. The wall stretches on. The stars above are steady. We say nothing, for words are not needed. We simply stand in stillness. Another traveler in the long river of time. Another pair of eyes resting upon the silent stones. The Great Wall is ancient, yet it is also modern. It no longer stands as a defense against raiders, nor as the frontier of empire, yet it remains alive in the imagination of people everywhere. Its stones no longer echo with drums or the calls of watchmen, but with the footsteps of visitors, the clicking of cameras, the hush of all. The wall has shifted from fortress to symbol, from garrison to memory, from a place of labor to a place of reflection. In China today, the wall is seen as a heritage of all people, a shared monument linking past and present. It appears on stamps, coins, banknotes, and posters. It is painted in classrooms, carved in souvenirs, spoken of in lessons. School children learn of its vastness, its age, its place in the story of the nation. To them, it is not a ruin of forgotten dynasties, but a symbol of endurance, a reminder that their ancestors built something so vast that even time itself could not erase it. In the world beyond China, the wall is equally powerful as an image. To many, it is the first thing thought of when the word China is spoken. Travelers imagine it winding across mountains. Artists imagine it as a dragon of stone. Poets imagine it as a metaphor for endurance or division or hope. Even those who have never set foot upon it carry its shadow in their minds, as if the wall itself were a dream shared across continents. Films and novels have placed it in countless stories, sometimes as backdrop, sometimes as mystery, sometimes as legend. Painters have set it beneath suns and moons, under clouds and storms, surrounded by blossoms or snow. Photographers have captured it in morning mist, at golden dusk, under stars. Each image adds to the great tapestry of imagination, layering new meanings upon old stones. Some imagine the wall as strength, a symbol of what humanity can build when united in purpose, of the power of patience, of the will to endure. Others imagine it as sorrow, a reminder of the countless lives lost in its making, of the burden carried by laborers whose names are forgotten. Still others imagine it as beauty, a ribbon of stone blending with mountains, a line that seems less man-made than natural, part of the very earth. In truth, the wall is all of these things at once. It is grandeur and grief, strength and fragility, permanence and decay. That is why it continues to live in the imagination. It does not belong to one story alone, but to many stories, each traveler, each poet, each dreamer seeing it through their own eyes, shaping it in their own way. Technology has carried the wall even farther into imagination. Satellites show it from above, winding across deserts and ridges. Drones trace its towers, cameras capturing perspectives once unseen. The internet spreads its images in an instant, so that someone sitting oceans away may see the wall as clearly as one standing upon it. And yet, even in this new world of easy images, the wall still surprises those who finally touch its stones. Photographs show its length, but not its silence. Videos show its shape, but not its weight. Only when standing upon it does one feel the truth of its presence, quiet, heavy, eternal. Perhaps that is why the wall continues to matter, because it invites imagination but resists completion. It can be painted, photographed, written about, sung of, but it is never fully captured. It is always more vast, more silent, more patient than the image we hold. Its stones are not only in the earth, but also in the mind, where they rest as symbols, metaphors, and dreams. And so, as we picture tonight, the Great Wall is not only in mountains or deserts. It is also in memory, in culture, in imagination. It is a wall of stone, but also a wall of thought. It stretches across ridges, but also across minds. It is not finished nor forgotten. It is alive in silence, in stories, in us. The Great Wall, after centuries of building and rebuilding, now rests in many states at once. Some stretches stand proud, restored and polished, their stones firm beneath countless footsteps. Others are ruins, broken and overgrown, their battlements fallen into the valleys, their towers leaning like tired sentinels. Still others have disappeared almost entirely, melted back into earth and grass, remembered only in faint ridges across the land. Together, these fragments form not one wall, but a memory, a living heritage scattered across mountains, deserts, and time. To walk the restored wall is to see grandeur. Near Beijing, the battlements rise sharp and clean, their bricks tight, their stairs steep, their towers whole. Tourists climb slowly, pausing at each turn to gaze out upon ridges stretching endlessly. Guides tell stories. Cameras click, laughter drifts. It is the wall as the world imagines it. Vast, intact, a dragon of stone winding into the horizon. This is heritage polished, kept alive not for defense, but for memory, so that all may see what once was. To walk the ruined wall is different. In remote valleys, the stones crumble, grass grows upon the ridges, trees root themselves in broken towers, lichen spreads across brick, sheep graze near fallen battlements. Villagers walk paths where armies once marched. There are no drums, no horns, no soldiers, only silence. Yet in that silence is another kind of truth. The wall is revealed not as invincible, but as human. It erodes, it breaks, it softens, just as all things do. Its ruin is not loss, but reminder that even the mightiest works of men return to the earth, and in returning they become part of nature once more. Between these two, restoration and ruin, lies heritage. The wall is not entirely saved, nor entirely forgotten. It is tended where it can be, left to rest where it cannot. Governments protect stretches, archaeologists study them, villagers live alongside them, travelers walk upon them, taking photographs or simply standing still, listening to the wind. Each interaction adds to the wall's memory, carrying it onward into the present. The Great Wall is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, not only for its scale but for its story. It is recognized as belonging not just to China, but to the shared memory of humanity. It is both monument and ruin, both presence and absence, both strength and fragility. Its stones are not merely relics. They are reminders of patience, of effort, of time's quiet passage. What does it mean to call the wall heritage? Perhaps it means to accept it as is, restored or broken, silent or crowded, and to honor both. The polished towers remind us of ambition and grandeur. The crumbling ridges remind us of impermanence. Together, they form a whole, the living memory of centuries, offered to the present as gift. And so, as we imagine it tonight, the wall lies before us in two forms. At once, to the east, a tower restored, its battlements sharp against twilight, lanterns glowing softly within. To the west, a ridge of ruin, stones scattered, grass bending in wind, a tower collapsed into earth. Both are the wall, both are heritage, both whisper of time's hand. We stand between them, listening to silence, knowing that the wall is not only stone but memory, not only history but living presence. The Great Wall does not move, it does not hurry, it does not speak. It simply rests, stretched across mountains and valleys, waiting as centuries pass. Dynasties have risen and fallen. Soldiers have come and gone. Villages have grown and faded. Caravans have crossed deserts. Armies have clashed at gates. Emperors have dreamed of eternal strength. And still the wall remains quiet, patient, breathing only with the wind. It has seen more seasons than we can imagine. Blossoms drifting in spring, thunder rolling in summer, leaves falling in autumn, snow burying its stones in winter. It has seen dawns when the mountains glowed pink with new light, and dusk when the sky burned gold before fading into night. It has watched stars appear and vanish, watched moons wax and wane, watched comets blaze briefly before disappearing forever. Time moves, but the wall endures unhurried. Like a mountain that learned to walk. It has heard many sounds, too. Beat of garrison drums, the cries of watchmen, the tramp of armies climbing its steps, the voices of villagers calling across fields, the laughter of children chasing each other in its shadow, the bells of caravans, the songs of poets, the weeping of those who lost loved ones to its labor. Today it hears footsteps of travelers, the click of cameras, the whisper of guides. Tomorrow it will hear only the wind again. Sounds come and go. The silence remains. It has carried many meanings. To emperors, it was power. To soldiers, it was duty. To laborers, it was burden. To poets, it was sorrow. To villagers, it was neighbor. To traders, it was gateway. To travelers, it is wonder. To the world, it is symbol. And yet beneath all meanings, the wall is simply what it is: stone and earth, brick and timber, patient in its endurance, content in its silence. Perhaps that is why it comforts us. We live quickly, our days passing in rush and noise. The wall reminds us of slowness. It teaches us that even the longest journey is made stone by stone, day by day, hand by hand. It teaches us that even what seems eternal is fragile, yet that fragility can endure far beyond lifetimes. It teaches us that silence has its own strength, that stillness is not weakness but patience. If we stand upon the wall at night, far from cities, with only the stars above, we feel these truths. Stones are cool beneath our hands, the air is deep and still, the mountains stretch endlessly. The wall winds into darkness, vanishing where our eyes cannot follow. In that moment, we understand that the wall is not only history, it is eternity itself, watching quietly, asking nothing, offering only presence. And so we end our journey here, at the quiet ridges, where the wall lies in shadow and starlight. It has told us its story not with words, but with silence. It has shown us its strength not with battles, but with endurance. It has carried us through centuries, only to leave us here, in the stillness of the present. The Great Wall does not need us to remember it. It will remember itself, but we, in remembering, find something of our own endurance, our own patience, our own silence. The wall waits, as it always has, watching mountains, watching skies, watching eternity.